businesses that are going to thrive and grow fastest are the businesses that embrace AI and LLMs into the entire digital infrastructure of their company. Use the create prompt formula and it will improve the outputs that you're getting from your day-to-day task management. Because some of the roles that previously existed are going to have to fundamentally change. Some of them won't be here in the next 5 years.
Steve Pailthorpe, the President of the United States recently brought iconic leaders in the field of AI. People are moving the needle more than anyone knows. Bill Gates, Sam Altman, Mark Zuckerberg, Tim Cook, the best brains in the world. He brought them around the table to create America's AI action plan. What are we doing in the UK about this?
Well, it's a really interesting thing when you look at this, because artificial intelligence, of course, is revolutionizing the way that business and business leaders and indeed everyone within the business landscape can operate through large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, Microsoft Copilot. These things are saving time. They're driving efficiency in the workforce. They're leveling up. Those individuals who are perhaps junior colleagues are now able to communicate at a senior level, and the amount of time and resources that can be saved through all of these things is phenomenal. Of course, it does really raise the question of ethics and also the challenges associated with AI and how we manage that in a business context. But look, here in the UK, we're living in the fast-paced world where everything is evolving, and the UK needs to embrace AI and digital technology rather than shy away from it. And indeed, we are across the whole of our country, in the National Health Service, in the local authorities, and indeed within all of the small business communities. We are really stepping up to use large language models and things like ChatGPT to streamline and create efficiency. I think that there is a really difficult question which we've got to ask, which is how do we empower the next generation to understand what they want to do for work? Because many of the jobs that historically we would have been thinking about, those jobs will be not in the same context in the future because of the way that AI is evolving. So we do need to think about these things with a longer term view. At the moment, I think everyone is scrambling to run to the table to look at AI, to embrace it, but not necessarily understanding that AI is going to give leaders more time to think. And it's the thinking space that actually is the powerful thing, because if we get more time back, then we can be more creative. We can't over rely on AI to just do everything for us, because at the very foundational level, AI is AI is a tool that can be used. It's not something that's going to empower thought leadership and creative change. So if we're just using it at a base level, we're really not going to get the best out of it.
I really like something you said in the middle of all that. It's giving us time to think. When we get time to think, we can be creative. You know, that's putting leaders on the front foot. And you also said fast-paced. That would be an understatement for the feeling of business communities around the world. It is definitely fast-paced. What I like about the President of the US, what he's done there, is he's created an action plan. And that's really what we want businesses in the UK to do, create an action plan. Now, LLMs, you mentioned a few, Copilot, GPT, you mentioned a few there. What is an LLM?
Well, LLM stands for large language model. Okay, let's strip it down to its basic, most simple level. An LLM is a predictive agent that enables question-based outcomes to predict the next word in a sentence. So essentially it's looking at all of the information, all of the inputs that people are putting from content all around the world, and it's working out what the best, most logical next word is in a sequence. So that's what a large language model does. So
that's it? Is it just predicting the next move?
Absolutely. It's synthesizing the next outcome for the next word in a sentence. So if you look at it when you're on your phone and you've got predictive text that comes up, that's a very, very base level of what a large language model can do. Now, when we transpose that into a context like ChatGPT or Claude or Microsoft Copilot, what this is enabling is it's enabling it to produce things in a much more structured way. Now remember, a large language model doesn't think, it doesn't have emotional capacity, it's not able to think through the potential outcomes of something, so it is nuanced and it is based on the inputs that we put in. So can it put together sentences and structures? Well, of course it can. We know that, and it can do that incredibly well. But what I really want to get over today is if you put a poor prompt in, then the response that you're going to get out from an LLM is going to be average at least. So remember, you've probably only got around 750 to 1,000 words maximum within something like ChatGPT in terms of the output. And so the way that you're prompting AI agents and LLMs really determines what comes out at the end. And later what I'll do is I'll break that down for you, because I want to give you my create prompt formula. And this is something that we've worked on for the last 3 years to really help people work out how to prompt artificial intelligence correctly for business.
It doesn't think, it's not emotional, but based on the prompts that you give it, it can predict your next moves and put you on the front foot.
Absolutely. And look, think about it as a mathematical, scientific calculator. At the very base level, what artificial intelligence and AGI, what it's trying to do here is to predict and to provide the best possible average outcome based on the inputs. So think about the way that you use your phone, for example. So you might go into your phone, you might type a place or you might type a person's name, and what happens is your phone is able then to bring up all of those individuals that carry the same facial recognitioning or the same background location geo stamp on an image, and it presents all of that back to you. Now that's artificial intelligence operating in a really smart way. Just think about how that works for a moment. How is it able to do facial recognitioning? Was really, really simple if you break it down. Imagine you on a black background and we did a 1,000 by 1,000 grid on your face, and then we labelled each one of those cells A1, B1, C1, so on and so forth. So each one of those had a unique identifier. And then we looked at that first cell. Well, it's going to be black, 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 and suddenly, well, it's hit my face, so it's now white. And we're going to give that a number between 0 and 100, depending on the gradient. So we're able to create this black and white impression. Now, of course, with colour, it's even easier because we've got RGB, red, green, and blue. So we can then assign a colour value to what's actually shown on that grid. So by looking at things from a mathematical perspective, artificial intelligence is breaking down the image in that sense, and it is drawing a mock-up of what all of those things are within a number sequence. And it's then using that number sequence to go and cross-reference every image in your phone and present back to you the things that are there. So that's the backdrop.
It's pretty amazing.
That's the backdrop for how this is working. And when we apply that into a large language model, it's the same context. And I really want you to understand today for our listeners that the input that you put in with your prompts is going to determine the output of what you get. And the great thing about artificial intelligence, things like ChatGPT with LLMs, is it's leveling up the workforce. A junior colleague who perhaps doesn't have the writing skills of a mid to senior level manager is suddenly able to communicate with the same degree of competency and accuracy as that other person. Now, the problem is that if they don't prompt it correctly, we all know that there are 32 different parameters that show content is AI, and we know that AI content then doesn't rank.
I don't know there's 32 parameters, by the way.
So, you know, if you read a lot of content that's online, you'll hear the phrases like "in the ever-changing world that we live at," and all of that sort of stuff. Those words come from large language models because they're the normal way, or what AI considers to be the normal way in which content should be created. We're hearing now within the new emerging updates for GPT-5 that a lot of hidden technical content is being hidden within articles. So if you simply strip that content out of ChatGPT and you post it into Microsoft Word, and then you look for certain parameters, you'll see the M dash, you'll see Oxford Prose in use, all of those sorts of things. It's actually very, very easy to identify AI generated content. So think of it like this. AI generated content gets you 75% of the way there, but it does not replace our ability to think, to synthesize, and to analyze the inputs and outputs that we're getting from it. So should we use it? Absolutely. But should we think and describe and begin to imagine how we can save time and become more efficient and actually get better results through this? Definitely.
I quite like that as a bit of a model, really. 75% it gets you there, but then think, synthesize, and analyze. When you say analyze, is that from the results or is that from what do you mean analyze?
When you get an output from an LLM, you've got to be able to process that and to understand what it said. If you're just taking that, stripping it out, putting it into your email or putting it into your next step, then you really miss the purpose of what LLMs are able to do. And most people will put a prompt in and they'll take the output of that straight away. And remember, things like ChatGPT are remembering the trends that are going through. They're remembering the conversation history. And as a result of that, the idea of having an assistant with an LLM is a much better way at looking at this. An LLM is now becoming your cooperative assistant to work on a project together. So it's not input in, output, it's input, output, and eventually coming to a conclusion of something that's going to make sense.
It's an iterative process. There's, once it does give you answers, what I find myself doing is commenting back, actually, let's do this, this, and this. That's me thinking, synthesizing, analyzing what it said. That's basically what you've said. That's my 25%. I'm giving my 25% back to what it's done. So no, let's go for round two. Let's go for iteration number 2.
Indeed, absolutely. And we've got to think of it in that way, because what AI is going to do, it's going to streamline the way we work. And for business leaders, if you're watching this as a leader, as a manager, a CEO, don't just think of LLMs or AI as a way to get your processes faster. AI is fast becoming infrastructure. And infrastructure needs to be re-embedded. It's not just about speeding your processes up and just creating better efficiency. It needs to be fully integrated within your digital stack, within your technology, and within your infrastructure. And why is this important? Well, it's really essential, because if you haven't got those things embedded, then all you're doing is you're creating some fast-paced changes, but not really achieving any outcomes in the business. The businesses that are going to thrive in the next 3 years with the use of AI are businesses that have fully embraced AI into the technical stack. So here's how it works. If you look at your involvement with AI and how it's used in the business, if you're just using it to do tasks, then we're not really exploring the fullest extent of how AI can evolve. So picture, image generation, words, charts, reports, etc., shortening, abbreviating things. There's so many different things that AI, of course, can do with an LLM. So we've got to think of it as a means to take the business processing power to the next level, to improve our infrastructure, get it entrenched within the company.
Fully integrated then, and entrenching it, what does that involve?
We've got to think about this as a leadership challenge, because AI has to be embraced, it has to be modelled, and ultimately we've got to give space to our workforce to be able to test it and embrace it. There are going to be scenarios where teams simply don't have the capacity to just go fully in with AI. And of course, many organisations are still really concerned about the privacy challenges with AI. If I'm putting information into ChatGPT, where is that being stored? Is it then suddenly being accessible to people all over the world? If I'm using some of the newer LLMs that are emerging from the Far East and China, are those going to somehow affect my company's position? We all know the horror story from 2023 where AI apparently advised someone on strategies to kill Her Majesty the Queen. And we know about the president of Indonesia who used AI to essentially make his face more cute, because that would help his election campaign. So there are different things where we need to really address the ethics behind artificial intelligence use and how that is then brought in. But I think from a leadership perspective, it's about culture, it's about embracing learning, and it's about trying to involve the AI stack within your entire workforce, not just using it for time saving.
When you say AI stack, what do we mean when we say AI stack?
Most people are using AI as a tool to give them time savings. Here's the difference. If I'm writing a blog, or if I'm writing social media posts with artificial intelligence, with ChatGPT, What happens is I'm doing a task and I'm putting a prompt in. And so you've written your prompt, you've done some collaborative work with your AI assistant, and you've got an output. Here's the difference though. If I'm doing that prompt every single time, I'm not creating efficiency within the infrastructure of my company. But if I'm creating a process that involves automation where that chatbot is then performing a task on a regular program at a set time every single week, then suddenly we've got a system that is automatically doing the task that a human wanted to do or was previously doing. And this is where power comes, because your blog post that you have to write every single week is suddenly being automated. Your social media content is suddenly being pushed out. The analysis of what your competitors are doing online is suddenly generating an automatic report to the board. It's then doing your dashboards for your directors. It's analysing what's the best way to save time and efficiency across the workforce.
And this is the agentic version.
This is agentic AI in operation.
Which is something that's desirable for every listener right now.
If you're not thinking about this as a business owner, as a leader, then you're going to miss out. Because AI and agentic AI is the future of where everything is going. It's the process of combining tasks and automating those tasks within your business to create scale and drive efficiency.
Where does someone start?
Well, I think you've got to firstly understand the basis of how to prompt better. Once we've understood that, then we can look at how we connect the different tools that are out there. We would have seen in the last couple of months, there have been several iterations to ChatGPT to enable plugins from almost any other app in the world. So using things like Zapier to zap in tasks into GPT, connecting it with your email, whether that's Office 365 or Gmail, to ensure that all of your systems are talking together. Now AI should be able to read your email, write a cohesive response, and have that response ready in your drafts for when you wake up in the morning. Let's go a bit deeper, because if you use a format to brief your LLM, you're going to get a way better response.
And you've got a format or formula called Create.
That's right. So the Create prompt formula is something we came up with 4 years ago now, when ChatGPT was really first coming out, and we were looking at how it worked and how we could get the best task out of it. So let's just write that word down, create, C-R-E-A-T-E. C stands for character, okay? So character is how the LLM in this case is going to act. So act as an experienced sales and marketing director, act as a business coach. We could also use the word impersonate. So impersonate Richard Branson or impersonate someone of significance. Okay, so we're giving a framework there for the context in which the LLM is going to work. So if you're producing a report for your boss, then again, you work in finance, so act as a leading finance director with 25 years experience delivering reports to other finance professionals. That's C.
Wow, I mean, that is really powerful and simple, isn't it? Even I'm taking lessons on this one here.
Okay, second one, R is your request. Okay, so the request is what is it that you're wanting the AI to do in the context. So I now want you to create a 1,000 word summary of X, Y, and Z. Or I want you to write an email to respond to this customer complaint. Okay, and within that, I want you to think about it like this. If you were to bring an assistant into your business and you were to give them a task for the first time, how would you explain it to them? Because this is how you need to communicate with an LLM. You've got to be able to frame the conversation. You've got to be able to give them the backdrop for what the task is. So R is request. The next thing you're going to do is obvious. You're going to give them some examples. So here's some examples of how I've done it before. And this is what I'd like you to do. So include examples. Now, those could be bullet points. They could be extensions for web pages online. You could ask it to go and trawl the internet and look for different things like this. So it's thinking about it as an analysis piece of work, as a research piece, not just as a single request. Remember, your LLM is capable of doing multiple things to achieve your output. So not just doing one task in one go, it's going to be hitting several different points. So C-R-E, A is adjustments. Now, adjustments is going to be things that LLMs always deliver content in a certain way. So they're always going to use bolding and stylization. They're always going to have the double M dash. They're always going to be using Oxford Prose, which comes across in a certain way that just sometimes doesn't sound particularly human. So we need to tell it to adjust those things. Okay, so include those adjustments. Think about tone of voice and style. Always make my sentences short. Include information or exclude bullet points. Include titles and summaries in your paragraphs. Okay, so you're giving it some style. That's your adjustments. T is type of output. The type of output is really important, because if you're just asking it to produce an outcome, then it will produce that outcome straight away. Now, the best example of this is if I'm writing social media posts for a customer, I would say produce a 3-column table. Column 1 is the date of the post. Column 2 is the post. Column 3 is a suggested image, include emojis, etc., etc. So that's then going to produce a table grid structure for what I'm looking for. Now, remember, with GBT, we can have multiple different types of outputs. We could have PDF documents, we could have Word, we could have databases, we could have graphs, images, etc., etc. All of these things are easily possible with an LLM like ChatGPT. However, remember this. When you are asking GBT to take an output that is going into another technology stack, so outside of the OpenAI, it is then going to use more thought processing time and therefore lose word count. Okay, so it's going to produce on average between 800 and 1,000 words at a time. So if you are producing a report that needs to be 3,000 words long, you're going to need to break that into sections and say, right, we're going to do, this is the report, it needs to be 3,000 words. We're going to work on the introduction in section 1, which is going to be 1,000 words. Okay, but the moment you take that out and you want to put it into a PDF, it's not going to remember all the words. It's going to start discounting some of that because of the processing time that is used. So really, really important to remember that with T type of output. And the final one is E, which is extras. Okay, extras. Here's my formula for extras. Before, I'm going to give this to you word for word. Before generating the response, ask me any questions that you need to better understand what I have put in this instruction. That's it. Okay. By doing that, you are forcing it to firstly clarify that it's understood the scope of what you've asked it to do. Secondly, it's going to then ask you any relevant questions. And typically you're going to get things like demographic, you're going to get questions about the audience, you're going to get questions about what is the use case for this particular exercise going to be. All of that's really important, and you can then respond 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's then going to generate you a way better response.
It's beautiful, that last point as well. I think that's for every listener right now. Okay, so character is how it will act, basically. That's what you said. Request is what you want. You request what you want. Examples are, here's a few that we did before, or here's an example of another site that we want it like. Adjustments, that's what you said, is giving it style. Tell it what you want to adjust, the tone, the style. Type is where you want it, PDF form, report, etc. And the extras is, before generating this response, ask me any relevant questions that you need to give an even better response. Is that right?
That's correct. And remember, it's a conversation. With an LLM, don't just take the first response. See the response, work it through, go back and reset it up. And remember, you have preferences and settings within Claude and within ChatGPT. If you're getting consistently a bad response, or if you're consistently getting bold and stylization that you don't want for your particular area of work, go into your settings in the personalizations area and put those as an instruction right at the start. Whenever I'm producing talks or seminars, I always go in and I adjust my top level settings to get a better response and a better output, because that way you're going to ensure that you're getting the very best responses. Now, let me give you one example here. Most people will know that I'm also a Christian pastor, and so on the weekends I go and speak at churches, but then during the week I'm off doing my business stuff and talking about AI and digital marketing and these sort of things. And unfortunately, the other week I had to speak at a Christian business conference, and so the two personas of speaking in church, where it's understanding Bible verses and that sort of stuff, and then talking about AI, artificial intelligence, LLMs, and marketing automation, all this suddenly collided. And I realized something: it was not capable of processing two personas for me in one instance. So what I had to do is I had to go back, I had to strip out a lot of the information and say, hang on a minute, we're not dealing with a Christian conference here, we're dealing with an AI conference, because it had blended the two. Now, if you've got multiple roles that you're wearing, perhaps you're a charity director and a business owner, maybe you're a school governor, then think about how you structure those things out. Utilize your projects on the left-hand column, and that's then going to split those things out so that you don't get any blend between the responses that GPT gives you.
And the projects also organises it really well for you as well, so you know where to go next.
So where do we finish off when we're talking about AI? Well, we've got to remember firstly that AI is here to stay. Okay, with every technological shift in time, going back to the Industrial Revolution and then the invention of cars, even electric cars, all of the sort of stages, there's the early adopters, the people that jump on things. We are in the fast pace of rapid adoption where LLMs are now a central component for daily life for the majority of people. Okay, so this is fundamentally changing how we in business act. What we've got to remember is, how do we embrace this? How do we understand bias behind AI? Because AI will be eventually biased, because there are different things that have been created. So if we're looking at it in an African context, ChatGPT particularly is not going to respond with an African lens unless we tell it to. So we have to think about cultural, racial bias that comes through from responses that we're given. And then we have to think at a slightly bigger perspective. We've got some challenges with privacy. How do we manage that in the future? If we're putting all of this information in, where is it stored? How is it processed? What are the ethical challenges for that? And does that suddenly give governments exposure to a huge amount of data that they don't need? Possibly yes. So we need to think about that. But the most important thing, I think, is for our emerging younger generation, particularly here in the UK. We've got a young workforce, many of which are training, wanting to get education. They need to understand at a fundamental level how AI can enhance their job opportunities. And if they've got an idea of a career, how is that career going to change in the next 3 to 5 years? Because some of the roles that previously existed are going to have to fundamentally change. Some of them won't be here in the next 5 years.
So how do you see jobs being reshaped over the next 3 to 5 years, positively and negatively?
Well, I mentioned earlier about leveling up. Junior colleagues now have the ability to synthesize, analyze, and get efficiency in time that brings them up to mid-manager status much faster. However, with job opportunities, we're going to see a scenario where many of the day-to-day tasks that can be replaced by AI are going to be replaced very quickly. So as we talk about AGI, so agentic artificial general intelligence, as we talk about that, that's going to fundamentally shift some jobs out. So think about paralegals within the legal sector, drafting of contracts, preparation of documents. Those things will all be done through LLMs in the future. So those types of industries where people have been performing a functional task are likely going to shift and change. So think about ways in which you become more specialist within your creative power, within your ability to cognitively analyze. And we need to think about how we train our young people to do that, because if there's an over-reliance on AI, we're going to be in a position in the future where we're going to have some really, really big challenges with creativity and management.
So basically, the listeners should basically see a future where they're a specialist in some areas and there's creative power to it. Then you said cognitively analyze, so you can do thinking. The 25% that you mentioned earlier on, 75% is done over there. This 25% is your ability to think, synthesize, analyze, and go back. What are some of the most common mistakes when it comes to that prompting? Because we've got this create formula, which probably is, single-handedly for me, it's the best practice I've seen for creating prompts. Granted, I've not seen that many other than bits of advice. At least there's a formula here.
Yeah, and look, the biggest error that people make is they fail to do C, character. They jump straight in to the role that they're wanting to use, or they're straight into the task that they're wanting the AI LLM to produce. So when you go in, you must frame the role and responsibility, the character that you're wanting the LLM to act in their response. So if you're an academic, tell it to act as a leading professor within the business world. If you are a customer service representative, tell it to act as a customer service assistant specializing in X, Y, and Z. If you're wanting to write content for your website, then tell it to be a content writer, not just with 5 years experience, but with 25 years experience. Why? Because pre the web, there's an advantage of having journalistic copywriting rather than just having copy for the web. So when you frame things properly through that C, the character that we're going to give to the LLM, the output that you get will be way better than if you were just doing it without that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, that is probably the biggest mistake. How you act, what character. On my notes here, I've got I reckon the second is probably extras.
It is. Every time people never put that little snippet at the end. So remember, it's just such an easy thing to
Give
ask.
us your verbatim question again, because that is so empowering.
So before generating your response, ask me any questions that you need to generate the best possible outcome for the task I'm asking you to do. Okay, so that way it's going to think about it, it's going to work out what it doesn't know, what it does know, and it's going to ask you a list of questions. And you can literally just respond. 1, demographic equals this. 2, style equals this, whatever the things it's asking you. And that way the level of the output that you get from your question is going to go from a 50% to a 90% straight away.
I mean, what impact will mastering prompting have on leadership and decision making?
I think that firstly, we're going to have to make sure that we create in businesses a prompt playbook. So effectively, we're teaching people how to generate better outcomes for inputs that we give to LLMs and to OpenAI.
Well, should every business in the UK adopt that create formula right now?
In my opinion, every business in the UK should adopt the create prompt formula into their infrastructure of how they use AI.
With all the team members?
With every single one. Train them on the usage of it, get them focusing on how to generate the best possible prompts, really work to ensure that that is embedded within your business.
I've not seen anything better. I've not gone searching for it, but maybe I will do after this. If I was to apply Create today, is there anything specifically that I need to do or be aware of before I go and do that, or just literally follow each one of those steps?
No, look, this can be applied into any LLM. So if you're using Google Gemini, if you're using Claude, if you're using Copilot, ChatGPT, use the create prompt formula and it will significantly improve the outputs that you're getting from your day-to-day task management. So you're setting the standard for how the LLM is going to respond to you. You're going to get a way better response that is articulate, clear, and analyzes things in a much clearer and better way.
So if I'm going into ChatGPT, let's look at this practically as an example. I'm going to spend a good amount of time using the create prompt formula before I press enter.
Indeed, yeah. And I've trained people on this over the last 2 years. And the biggest outcome that people have said is like, wow, my prompt creation time has just gone up significantly. Isn't it actually just better for me to do the task at hand? Well, no, because the AI has better understanding of all of the different other things that are outside of your knowledge base, but it won't necessarily save you time in the creation of that prompt. And that's why putting together a prompt playbook is really, really important, because once you've refined a prompt that's working well, use it again and again and again, and train your team in order to ensure that that is embraced within the tech stack. Then, if it's something that works and is being a functional task that's done once a month, once a week, once a day, then think about AGI of how we can implement this as an automated task through AI, through LLMs, connecting things together so that that AI is performing that task at the same point every time. That's where the efficiency comes.
Will prompting remain a key skill long term or not?
prompting is always going to need to be a key skill, certainly in the next 3 years. Remember, AI currently is operating within a framework, or I like to call it a boundary line. So you've got a boundary line for where AGI and LLM sit. That could be to operate within this structure, within a business or whatever. As we move into machine learning at a bigger, much wider context, the boundary lines are going to grow and become slightly more blurred. And this is where particularly governments need to start thinking and asking the bigger questions about privacy, about how data is managed, and how we restrict LLMs or AI as a whole to functional areas. Everyone knows the story of how ChatGPT 5 went to kill off ChatGPT 4. And so you see that there were two different code bases that were in operation, but yet one was trying to kill off the other because it thought it was inferior. So is AI taking over the world? Yeah, you can be pretty sure it is. Should we be really worried about it? Well, no, not as long as we've put the protection measures within our systems and structures. And this is a government decision. This is what we need to be considering at a national level to how we embrace AI, but to create a framework where businesses and indeed children can use it to get the best possible outcome, but with some security and protection measures in place.
Well, in the fast-paced world that we're in today, we have definitely got an action plan here. So America had the American AI action plan, and we've got something here for the UK. Create. Start with prompts. Remember, it's just conversations. And this can have a huge impact on businesses, effective, immediate. What are your final words of wisdom for the listeners right now?
The final thing I would say to you today is, if you are just using LLMs to do simple tasks, to search the internet, to simplify something, you're touching the surface of what an LLM can do. The companies, the businesses that are going to thrive and grow fastest are the businesses that embrace AI and LLMs into the entire digital infrastructure of their company. This is where AGI is going, and this is where companies will drive efficiency, process savings, synthesis of learning and culture. All of that is incredibly important. This is all about leadership. Where does the CEO, where does the CMO, where does the operations director sit within this to ensure that an LLM is embedded within a company's culture? It has to be led from the top. We have to give time for learning. We have to give space for creative things to go wrong. But we also have to be aware that companies that embrace this and get on the bandwagon are going to be the ones that generate the most profit.